What up, meatheads? This is Travis, American Butcher. And this, what is this? Who are you? Who am I? That's, no, seriously, who are you? No, this is the Meat Block Podcast, a weekly podcast by butchers for everyone. And this week is a very special episode, and it's a very special episode indeed, and I'll tell you why. You ever have one of those episodes when you're recording a podcast and you sit down and you have no material prepared because life is so hectic? Life is so crazy. Well, that is what I have for you right now. So I'm very interested to see how this shakes out.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
Good at portioning. So if we look at our strip steaks here, got good marbling.
What are you watching?
What's happening? My computer just all of a sudden had a life of its own.
Oh, are you watching an instructional video on how to cut strip steaks?
Oh no, I had a video on before from this pack house. Yeah.
It's weird.
That's so weird. It just started up out of nowhere. It started up when you called.
Huh. Bryan Mayer. Welcome to the Meat Block Podcast with Travis. We're live.
Am I on?
Yeah, I'm
really?
recording. Yeah.
Jeez, that's crazy.
This is how I do it. How are you?
I think that's a federal offense or something. No?
No, sure. Well, I eventually told you.
You did after I gave away so many trade secrets.
I know about you in your jank-ass computer that automatically plays videos.
You caught me. I don't know how to cut a strip steak. Fuck. Busted.
Yeah.
It's been a sham all these years.
I hear in New York they call it a New York steak.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. Or, in New York, some folks are prone to calling things what they're not actually. So I'm pretty sure you can call it whatever the hell you want to call it.
Yeah.
Nobody would give a shit.
Well, with generic labeling, I could call it a Travis steak.
You could.
Yeah.
A travesty, that would be, perhaps. Sorry. I'm not as good as you.
Well,
that wasn't
good. I'm sorry. I was pandering.
I was listening to a local radio station as I was driving yesterday that plays all today's hot hits. Uh-huh. And it was,
today's best variety.
Yeah. So it was a lot of I don't know what it was. A lot of Drake, probably, I assume. Right?
Yeah.
But I came to the realization that you don't actually have to rhyme anymore. Right? No. That's a thing. You don't have to do that anymore.
I feel like Eminem proved that with
Yeah, but really? Because he was pretty good, right? The way that he would change the word to fit, but they don't even try anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no trying. And the way, say, all those dudes like Aesop Rock and Black Alicious and all those cats used to, they were so into their rhymes and they wanted you to know. So, enunciation and all that sort of stuff, right? That's all gone.
Yeah. Well, I think I just got a great idea for this week's episode is, since I got you.
White dudes getting really old.
No, well, that's true. But fuck you, I'm young.
I know. We're a different generation.
So I lost my train of thought. So since I have world famous Bryan Mayer, master tradesman, I'm not going to say Master B because I know you don't like that the sound of someone who declares themselves a master, or you're humble and you have modesty and all that. But since I have such a great and excellent butcher on, we're going to talk about music and what bands, what are 3 songs or bands that have changed your life, where the first time you heard it, it was an experience that brought you like, oh, I didn't know music could be like this, or just a song that like is like a passing into one realm or another in your stage of life, I guess you could say. Three definitive bands or songs that shaped you.
Well, first of all, only one of those things you just said is true, and that would be my name. So, wow, 3. I can't. I'm so bad at doing stuff like this because that's like when people say like, "What's your favorite movie?" or "What's your favorite song?" or "What's your favorite thing to eat?" And it's just all like based on mood and all that sort of thing.
But it like this.
No, I get it though. I get what you're saying. Huh. Ooh, let me think. Well, what do you got? Give me one. You start.
Well, I would say like it may not be okay. It doesn't have to be your favorite or change, but there's those milestones in life where it's like your first smoke. You remember the first time you were when you took a drag of a cigarette. You remember. You could remember what you were wearing the first time you had sex, or the first day of junior high.
Well, hopefully it was nothing.
Yeah.
But that probably wasn't the case. It was probably like, way too many clothes.
Yeah.
It was probably way too many clothes for
what
was
awkward.
about to partake.
And maybe your first smoke happened at the same time.
Well, okay, so I got one for you.
Okay.
So this would be a record that my very, very good friend, Brian O'Leary, who is no longer with us, played for me. And he was this older kid that lived down the block from me. And he was a metalhead. Mm-hmm. And his older brother, John, was too. And like I idolized John. And John rode motorcycles, right?
Yeah.
And like his now wife Irene, but his girlfriend Irene at the time was smoking hot, right? And they would show up and just be super cool. So I used to hang out at Brian's house all the time. And I was super young, and just because I was playing music, I'd just hang out with all these older cats because they could get into the clubs, and I played in bands with them and stuff. So I was trained, and I played classical and I played jazz. And then I listened to some of the stuff that my dad would listen to. Like he was like a big like Crosby, Stills and Nash fan, Elton John, like all that kind of stuff. He listened to a lot of that stuff, and classical and jazz and shit. But I remember going over to Brian's house one day, and he had this album, and it was this black album cover with like blue, and it had an electric chair, right? Mm-hmm. And lightning shooting through the sky, and it was Metallica's Ride the Lightning.
Yeah.
And I had never heard anything like this ever. Mm-hmm. And he put that album on for me, and the opening song, right? Like just blew my mind. And then we just listened to the whole album, flipped it over, and just like every song, one right after another. It was just incredible, And so we listened to it, and he's like, "You hear that bass player in there?" Because at that time, all I wanted to do was like go to the Juilliard, which I never did.
Yeah.
But he's like, that bass player went to the Juilliard. So I was like, he gave me the record, and I went home, and I was like, "Ma, you got to hear this," And she just was like, "This is not happening. You can't listen to this in the house." But like that really changed everything that I thought I knew about music, and how you could apply what you had learned, which for me was classical and jazz, to play almost anything. So that was a pretty big record for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then the story of it too, like me and Brian were so close for a while, and so for him to have like that impact on my musical career, because I think that's what really, I was very fortunate in my musical career. I got signed at a very young age, and of course dropped soon thereafter. But, for a minute, like, I could be like, yeah, I'm a Columbia Records recording artist. That's super cool. I'm going to be a rock star. And that never happened. But it did set me on this path to like live out a dream, which was to play music and travel the world and record and do a lot of really cool, fun things with a lot of really awesome people. So, yeah.
Awesome. I think my first album Like, so we said, like, my parents were the what do you call the baby boomers. So like when I was growing up, my dad always had the oldie station on in the car, and I so I learned all the oldie songs, you know, like everything from the Do Wah Diddy. And I remember singing the song at my daycare, but I changed the lyrics to be vulgar.
Because that's what you do.
Yeah.
When you got a word like Diddy in there.
Yeah. So like.
And you're 7 or whatever.
So instead of like walking down the street, somehow you're fucking down the street. And instead of getting in trouble by my teachers who heard this, in hindsight, like I didn't when it was happening, I didn't understand. But looking back, they were amused and got the other teachers for me to do it, to sing it. But I didn't want to in fear of getting in trouble. But they were doing it to be like, this is funny.
Yeah.
And I think that's my first real experience musically. My first performance, I guess.
Your first performance.
Yeah.
Solo walking down the street.
Yeah.
Being Luke from Two Live Crew before he existed. Yeah. Or before he was on your radar, I should say, because he was existing and doing those things. Yeah.
And then like I got my 10th birthday, the double digits, 93. I got a CD player. In 93, if you had a CD player, you were fucking cool. You were, you know, like the people had CD players, but like a couple years before they were like like $500.
Hell yeah.
And I got one CD, and it was
and a CD. And just to be clear, a CD player, not a Discman.
No,
like
just a CD player.
Just sits at home on your shelf.
Yeah, like
your hi-fi system.
No, it wasn't like that thing that I couldn't touch. It was a boom box. You know, the ones where eventually the CD lid doesn't close, so you have to put like a shoe or some weights or wedge some shit.
Totally, yes.
And I had one CD, and it was the only CD I had for about 3 years. And I know every single lyric to it. And I've seen this band many times because it was the one CD. It was the Violent Femmes' self-titled album.
Nice.
And so I would have to say that would be one of the albums that definitely shaped me who I am today.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one. Mm-hmm. That's a really good one. 1993?
Yeah. So that album's already 10 years old.
Yeah, right? Mm-hmm. Because, like, you had all that transition from the punk era, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which, you know, so, you know, obviously I'm just born, but I have an older brother, older sister.
Yeah.
We live in New York, and, right? Yeah. And, like, they're into the punk scene. So I'm listening to their records.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm like, you know, television, what's this band, right? Mm-hmm. Marquee Moon? Oh my goodness, this is amazing, right? Like, or the Dead Boys? You got to be kidding me, right? Or go down the list of like, you know, and it's funny because the other night I couldn't sleep, and I was just kind of, you know, I had read for a little bit, and then whatever, I put the TV on, and there was that CBGB's movie that they put out. I forget the date of it, but it was with Alan Rickman. Mm-hmm. was Hilly Crystal, and yeah, and I don't know, man, and I don't know if it was a good movie or a bad movie, but I just sat and watched it, like, you know, it was a history lesson right in front of you, right? You know, because here's this guy that opens this, like, this, you know, this incubator of incredible talent, right? That rolls through the door here. Again, television, right? The Dead Boys, Deborah Harry, Patti Smith, right? Like all these cats rolling through this club in New York City. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I don't know. I don't think that was like as formative for me in the stuff that I listened to, or whatever. Try to think, like, I don't know, anything Miles Davis, because I was listening to such traditional classical jazz, like Jimmy Smith's stuff and things like that, that when I first heard Bitches Brew,
mm-hmm.
I just, and like really sort of got into these people that, I don't know, I felt music was so much a part of their life. It was their blood. I know that sounds silly, right? But like they lived, slept, ate, breathed music, right? Miles Davis and Coltrane and, and so when I first heard Bitches Brew, it totally blew my mind. But then cause it set me down this path to where I later got into all these other sort of, like these just really far out there jazz cats. And then I came across Jaco Pastorius. And then I went down that route of like, oh, this guy's a genius. And he was also insane, like most were. Jaco Pastorius has this record, that he did, and it's just big band orchestra stuff. And it's his own album, because he had been a sideman for so long, right? He was playing with so many different people. He's playing with Herbie Hancock, right? And Weather Report, Chick Corea, like all these like monster jazz cats, right? And he'd go off and do something crazy with like Joni Mitchell. You're like, what the fuck, right? But then he puts together this big band orchestra type of thing, and it was so amazing, right? And then at like any given day, you could like walk through New York City and like down in the West Village, and he'd be like on West 4th Street out of his mind, right? On the basketball courts, just playing his bass, right? I mean, I never saw this, but like you would hear all these like crazy stories. So that dude really, like, I don't know, he totally did it for me. He just made me feel that like, I played the bass. That's what I was a bass player. And I don't know, I think it's inherent in bass players to always feel slightly less than. So you always do more. Like you're the most responsible person in the band, right? You're the one that's always talking to the promoters and the club owners, right? You're the one that's making sure all the gear gets back in the trailer or the van or whatever, And so I always think too, it's just because like I always had this feeling of like, oh, I need to do more. So I need to learn more instruments. I can't just be a bass player. But that dude really kind of made me feel like, oh, not only can you be a bass player, but you can be a composer. You can do all this stuff, and you can play any genre. So that was a pretty awesome record.
Yeah, I think like when I was in high school, like I started getting into like punk and hardcore. I was listening to a lot of bands like, 7 Seconds and Dead Kennedys and Minor Threat when I was in junior high. And the next evolution was like bands like Youth of Today and Gorilla Biscuits. And then I remember when I discovered Bane for the first time, and just hearing Aaron Beldeck, the lead singer of Bane, who has a traditionally not good voice, hardcore or otherwise. He does more of a talk singing of anything. And just like realizing just like how fucking awesome hardcore was. It was like, I saw them live before I ever heard their album, and just seeing the reaction of like, he moves this way, the crowd goes, and it's just all singing, and there is no separation between the stage and the crowd. Really made me fall in love with the genre of hardcore, and and that's what I listened to hardcore for pretty much from the time I was like 14 until I was like, well, I still listen to it today, but I stopped going to shows and when I was like 25. But I think Bane, and then the album Holding On to This Moment, or I forget that may not be the name, but yeah, that Bane is one of those bands that really did it for me.
Gotcha. Yeah. Hardcore was like, I had a bunch of friends. Long Island had a really big hardcore scene.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, New York had a slightly big hardcore scene, right? But Long Island, for some reason, had this hardcore scene out there. And it was just I don't know, just for some reason, that was a genre that kind of skipped over me or whatever. And not because I didn't like it or appreciate it. I didn't have a lot of opportunity to play it, I guess. Mm-hmm. There was a friend of a friend that had a band called Vision of Disorder or something like that were kind of big, I think. It kind of filled in a little bit when they were kind of between musicians and stuff, and I happened to be home from tour and whatnot. And that was fun, but it just kind of wasn't for me. But yeah, I listened to like the Cro-Mags for a little bit. They'd be hardcore. Yeah. Would you put them in that genre?
Yeah. Well, right? Yeah. Cro-Mags, and then, Bad Brains is hardcore.
Sure.
And then like you get even later in hardcore, more like what people call post-hardcore, which I hate that fucking phrase.
Sure.
You get bands like, and I know we've talked about Botch before in American Nervoso.
Of course we talked about Botch.
And I know
Botch were super awesome. And then some of those guys later went on to play in Minus the Bear.
Yeah.
Which was the complete opposite of Botch. What's that song Botch has? Something like "Let's Hear It for the Worker Bees" or something like that. I think,
that
which
whole
is just
album's good,
fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
We got thrown into the when I got dropped. I was a studio and session player for a while. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be in a band or anything like that. And then friends of mine from Chicago were coming to New York and asked me to play, and I was a big fan of theirs, so it was awesome. But we got thrown into the post-punk category, which I never really understood, like all those post labels, post-hardcore, post-punk. I was never really too sure what they meant, I guess. I don't know. Because we were a punk band for sure, right? Like, but we had, but it was like elements of, say, bands like Fugazi, or Afghan Wigs, and it was kind of all over the place, and I don't know what you would categorize those bands as.
I don't know. Like, I know, like, it's weird because there's, a lot of hardcore kids I was friends with also listen to like a lot of pop punk as well. They listened to like, Dynamite Hack, and then turned into like listening to like Blink 80. And like, I don't think it was ever ironic. And then they started listening to bands like Set Your Goals. And that was like the more poppy hardcore they had listened to. And then like another group split off and would listen to like Dillinger Escape Plan, Converge.
Oh yeah. Sure.
And then there's just like true hardcore where it's like, Bury Your Dead and, Hatebreed and, bands like that. But like for me, I like that. And then there's Youth Crew. And like, I was into Youth Crew a lot when I was younger, like that more like 2-step pick up, sing along. And then there became like the weird, not chauvinistic side, but just tough for the sake of being tough hardcore, which was, like I think a lot of teen angst in like just insecure men fall into, because it's like,
just a lot of aggression and anger and
like, now I got a crew.
I didn't, I wasn't, there wasn't any scene that I was aware of by me, or, I mean, I'm sure it was all there. Mm-hmm. It's just something that like just kind of totally skipped over me.
Yeah. There was a huge scene in my town that me and my friends like built. And then we're also like 90 miles north of LA. So like, then if you went to shows in Ventura, you had your friends from the LA scene would show up if you went to shows in LA. You had your friends from the San Diego scene show up.
Yeah. I think for me, I wanted to stay relevant as, and stay working, I wanted to be a working musician. And so it was just like, you play everything. That's how you stay working, right? You learn everything that you can. And you could literally go from club to club in a night. You could play, as many shows as you could physically play a night in as many genres as you could possibly play, a night and then a week. Cause the music scene in New York was, I'm sure it's still incredible. It's moved, time has moved on. And it's funny. I was sitting with a friend and we were talking not too long ago, and he was doing the thing that people do where they go like, oh, it's no good anymore, and we were the last that it was as good. And, it's all gone downhill and blah, 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 and all that sort of thing. And I'm like, that's not true. I said, it's just not for us anymore. Like these kids are out here doing really cool shit that we don't know about because we're not supposed to know about it, and that's just the way it is. And we said the same thing, and the people before us said the same thing, and the people before us said the same thing. But, it was really fun. It was cool. I had a blast. I met a lot of really great people. I loved kind of being in multiple different scenes and kind of moving around. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Moving out of hardcore punk. What's your last band or album?
Man, there's so many. There's so many moments where people gave me records or CDs or something like that. My brother-in-law at the time, he was my sister's boyfriend. I think it was a Christmas or something like that. He gave me a Replacements album, and I was like, this is awesome. It's like I had so many moments because people knew that I loved music, and so they were always giving me stuff. I worked. My dad used to have a business, and
what Replacements album was it? What did it have?
Please to Meet Me.
Okay, did it have?
He gave me both. He gave me Pleased to Meet Me, and he gave me Tim.
Okay,
right. Yeah. And so it's like, Pleased to Meet Me is the one where they're shaking hands on the front. It's like green cover. Mm-hmm. And then Tim, I think they're sitting on the roof. Is that the one where they're sitting on the roof? I forget.
I don't know.
They're both insanely awesome records. A quick side note, never meet your idols sort of thing. So Tommy Stinson was this huge idol of mine, right? Because so I'm playing music, I'm in New York, I'm hanging out with all these older cats. Like I'm 12 years old, right? Yeah. Going to rock clubs and playing in bands. I'm not allowed to be in there. I can only be in there because I'm playing. As soon as I'm done, I have to leave, right? Yeah. And Tommy Stinson had the same thing, right? He was a kid. He was playing in his brother's band. He was playing in the Replacements, but he was too young to hang out, right? And so I just always remember these parallels, like, because I would play these shows and then they'd be like, all right, dude, you got to go home now. And I'd cry, right? Because I'm fucking 11, or 12. And I don't want to go home, right? But I have to go home. So flash forward, I'm in LA and I was playing with some friends of mine, and we had this pickup band, and we were kind of on this like little boutique label, and like Rami Jaffe from the Wallflowers would play keyboard for us, and Pete Yorn would come and like sit on drums and stuff. And we were at like, I don't know, like the Brown Derby. Does that sound like a thing? A place in LA?
Yeah. It sounds sure.
So we were in there, and I went to the bathroom, and Tommy Stinson walked in, and I fucking freaked out. And I was like, oh my God, Tommy Stinson, you have no idea, whatever. And he turned around to me because he's all fucked up. And he's like, oh, Tommy, I love you. And I was like, all right, man, you don't have to be a dick. And I walked out. So don't ever meet your idols because they'll crush you just like that.
That's why you should kill your idols.
Yeah. I think so. I was working. I every summer. I always there was always this rule. I always worked. And so if there was like a day off from school, if it was like a snow day or something like that, like I knew to like shovel the driveway or shovel the sidewalk and the steps and stuff, and then call my father, and somebody would come pick me up, and I go work in the factory. Mm-hmm. And so I was always working there. Summer vacation, I always work in the factory. And I worked with this guy, Percy, And he was a huge hip hop dude. He was like super good friends. Went to school with like the dudes from Brand Nubian. I don't know if people remember them or not, but like, I don't know. That's like the heyday of hip hop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess, I don't know. But he was such a hip hop head, and like, I, knew it and some of it, but like, I mean, the stuff that he turned me on to, like Brand Nubian, obviously, but all the old Eric B. and Rakim stuff and all this really old, awesome stuff that I would never have had exposure to. So all that like really great, like mid 80s hip hop, all because of Percy, just day in and day out, he'd be playing stuff. And it was all super amazing, but follow the leader, Eric B. and Rakim. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, as far as like my big introductory into hip hop was, like, I'm the youngest of 3 boys by a significant, like my the oldest brother's 6, and then the one above that's 9 years older than me. So they were Generation X very much. So they went to the, Guns N' Roses, Metallica tour. They went to the Beastie Boys, Run DMC tour.
Gotcha.
So like just to paint that era. So like I got like exposed to bands at a young age, or hip hop at a young age, and I just remember like the panic of like, still seeing the sound bites on the local news, like Oakland Raider hats will be banned in local schools starting and like, just like this fear of like urban inner city infiltrating white suburbia. And my brothers were very much a part of that, where I would start listening to NWA as like a 5-year-old, and it was just that thing that's like shocking to many parents, really not my parents, but like many parents, where it's like these kids are, listening to metal and they're listening to hip hop. And I think the main reason for that is because it's so far removed from living in suburbia that it's the most like imaginative thing out there to listen to, that it's like, whoa, these guys are crazy. And I remember being like a young kid and being like, man, I never want to go to LA. That place is crazy. Then I ended up living there. My, family's from there, and, but I still to this day, and so does my mom, could sing a word along to every single word to Straight Outta Compton. And just because that's how much it was played at my house growing up.
Yeah, right. Like, and like clearly, I didn't identify with it, right? I had no idea, other than like, and again, I think maybe that was the genius of a cat like Rick Rubin or whoever else, was like looking at hip hop and looking at metal or rock, right? And looking at all these guys and putting them together, right? And being like, y'all are creating like really raw music, and your lyrics are personal, and they're social, and there's all this stuff, right? Like, I remember, what was it? Was it the Public Enemy Anthrax? Crossover stuff that they used to do. And like Anthrax was super political, right? And then obviously Public Enemy, right? And I don't know. I remember like just going like, this is raw, and I love hearing it, and I love listening to it. Clearly I don't know what's going on, but like there's a message and all that sort of thing, and I think that's all I ever cared about in music, which, was what was the message behind it, whether it was classical and jazz, which is to me still the most incredible forms of music, because it's just moving you with melody. Right. And I don't know, to me, that's absolutely magical to be able to, right. I mean, the voice is an instrument, sure, but like, without a lyric, without something for you to hold on to, right? Like without the repeat stuff, was that comedian, Bo, whatever his name is, who loves to make fun. And he's got that song called Repeat Stuff. Yeah. Without the repeat stuff, right? Like, how do you pull somebody in? And so I don't know. I just always felt like these classical and jazz composers were masters, and not to take away anything from hip hop artists and rock artists and pop artists and all that. Yeah.
I think
so.
What?
Yeah. No, that's all. That's all I have to say. I don't know.
But
there's so much more. There's so much more. It's so hard to to encapsulate into just three. But
yeah, no, I could definitely talk about how like Too Short's album number 10 like specifically really like changed my life, because I remember just listening to that when my brother Brett would drive me to school, and just like, and then this was like 97, and then also listening to like Tupac's Machiavelli, and then right in that around that time frames when he got shot, and just like this is crazy. And he got shot either in 96 or 97. I was definitely in the 7th grade. I just don't remember what side of the year it fell on. But I just remember the environment and being in my resource class, because I'm dyslexic, and everyone was like shooken up and crazy, upset.
Wow.
But I think besides this being a great episode, I think it's going to be the most esoteric episode I've ever had of a Butcher podcast.
Are we moving into a new direction, right? Multifaceted, multi-dimensional butchers, right?
Sure. I'm up for anything.
What's the Onion thing that I just saw? Band full of musicians with tattoos are tired of being thought of as chefs or something like that. So you could put that in, and you could just substitute chef for butcher, I guess. I mean, there were a few of us that were musicians, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I been in bands and on tour. Never considered myself a musician, because I've always been the singer of the band, and I just have to come up with lyrics.
That's no small feat. I was terrible at that. I was not a songwriter. I am not a songwriter, and Lord knows people tried to turn me into those sorts of things. Especially back in the singer songwriter era that was happening in the late 90s. I worked for a couple of production studios, and they tried to get me to sing with a guitar in my hand, and I just kind of felt like that was not for me. Thank you very much.
Well, but it's weird. Since I grew up, or since I'm an adult now, I've actually tried to write, just more as an exercise or something. And then I was looking back at what the audio recordings and and I found songbooks that I wrote when I was like 16, 17 years old. And I fucking peaked back then. Like the stuff I write now is fucking garbage. And I don't know if it's because I'm now trying to recreate a process, or if I don't have that teen angst or that desire to express myself, because I found other outlets to do it, or maybe I'm just boring.
Maybe you're sober, right? No, you're not sober. Well, I mean, relatively speaking.
I don't know.
Yeah. No. I used to drink a lot, and I used to think it was such a great catalyst for writing, right? But I mean, it's just not true. Or maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe there's something out there that says downing bottles of wine makes you a much better writer, or something along those lines. Not that I consider myself a writer, because I'm not. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to write and be paid for it. But I don't think that makes you a writer any more than owning a camera makes you a photographer. What's what like?
Getting paid for writing.
Oh, getting paid for writing? I mean, it's fine, right? I think everybody should be paid for the work that they do. Writing seems to be one of those things where, for some time people felt like maybe exposure was payment, right? This is the same thing with music for a lot of folks, where exposure was payment. And I don't know who came up with that system, but that system sucked.
Yeah, the whole pay to play that we've talked about in other aspects of everything.
Well, I mean, that you can, I mean, that sort of, you could transition that into what we do and the whole idea of pay to play, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at kitchens. I mean, right? Like, I mean, without blowing people up for sure, we could certainly rattle off places that function because they have free help.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't even call it free help. I should call it free staff because the people are doing more than just helping.
Yeah. Stage is the French word for slavery.
Sure. I guess. Yeah. I mean, is it?
That diminishes the actual, I think, historical significance of slavery, but it's nonetheless not good if you're, because they're making money, and what are you really getting out of it?
Yeah. And I mean, look, it's hard, right? Because it's not a total inequitable relationship. I would like to think, right? But, right, you have to look at like the balance, right? Yeah. Where's that balance? Like, is it an equal distribution? Should it be an equal distribution? And I think like that's like a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with today, right? And in terms of like looking at like how systems are set up, like, should it be an equal distribution? Is there some benefit that you're gaining from it? Right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
All right. Well, I think we just recorded a 40-minute episode, and it's going to be released in the next half hour. So, Brian.
Oh, man. That's crazy. You're a master. You're a master engineer. Yeah, dude. Always good to talk to you.
All right. Thanks.
Take care, bud. Bye.
Just want to say big thanks to Bryan Mayer. That super awesome, amazing butcher. Teammate of mine. Yes, he is on the Butchers of America team to help represent in the 2020 World Butchers Challenge. I bet you didn't know he was also an accomplished musician and all-around great guy. That was literally, I had no idea what we're going to talk about. And when I sat down and recorded this, and I decided to call him because I haven't talked to him in like a couple days, and we talk on the phone often. And and that's kind of the quality you'll get here at the Meat Block. It's kind of like quality, but I think there was a lot of information in there, and it may be a little esoteric, but maybe it's refreshing to not talk about meat all the time. Anyway, until next time, keep your knife sharp and live in the margin.